The mail-order bride said, "You're coming with me." After finding a dying rich rancher at the station, she stepped down from the train with stiff legs and a tired body, holding her small brown suitcase close to her side. The long journey had drained her, but her heart was still beating with hope. This place was far from everything she had known. The air smelled of dust and iron, and the station looked quiet, almost forgotten by time. A single clock hung above the platform, ticking slowly, as if it too was unsure why it still bothered to move. Her name was Clara. She had traveled all this way because of a letter, one carefully written and sent with a promise of safety, stability, and a new life. The letter spoke of a rich rancher, a man with land, cattle, and a lonely heart. He wanted a wife, not for show, but for company. Clara had read the letter many times before deciding. Life where she came from had become too hard. Work was scarce, food was uncertain, and hope felt like a luxury. This offer felt like a chance given by fate. She adjusted her coat and looked around the station, expecting to see a man waiting for her, maybe nervous, maybe proud, but standing. Instead, there was almost no one. A station worker swept the floor slowly. A couple sat on a bench with their backs turned. Then she noticed him. At first, she thought he was sleeping. An older man lay slumped on a wooden bench near the edge of the platform. His hat had fallen to the ground, and his coat hung loosely on his thin body. One arm was bent at an odd angle, and his breathing looked shallow. His face was pale, almost gray, and there was a deep tiredness in his eyes, even though they were half closed. Clara felt a sudden tightness in her chest. She hesitated. This was not what she expected. She walked closer, her boots echoing softly against the platform. The man did not move. "Sir," she said gently. No answer. She put her suitcase down and leaned closer. She could hear him breathing, but it sounded weak, like each breath took effort. People walked past without stopping. Some glanced, then looked away. Clara felt anger rise inside her, mixed with fear. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked again, louder this time. The man's eyes opened slowly. They were cloudy but alert enough to see her face. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried to sit up and failed, falling back against the bench. "Please don't try," Clara said quickly. "You're not well." She knew fear would not help him. She picked up his fallen hat and placed it beside him. "My name is Clara," she said softly. "I came here today because of a letter." She reached into her coat and pulled out the folded paper, worn from being read too many times. She held it up. "From you, about marriage." A slow understanding crossed his features, followed by something like shame. You came," he said. "Yes," she replied, "and you look like you need help." "Didn't mean this." Together, they helped the man sit up carefully. Clara could feel how light he was, how little strength remained in his body. This was not the strong ranch owner she imagined. This was a man who had been alone for too long. An old wagon was arranged to take him to a nearby clinic. Clara climbed up beside him without thinking. The station worker looked surprised. "You don't have to go," he said. "Yes, I do," Clara replied firmly. The ride was slow and uncomfortable. The man drifted in and out of awareness. At one point he grabbed her sleeve weakly. "Why?" he asked. "You could leave." Hours passed before a doctor finally spoke to her. The man would live, but his condition was serious. He needed rest, care, and time. When she was allowed to see him, he looked smaller than before. His eyes filled with emotion when he saw her still there. "You stayed," he said. "Yes," she answered simply. "My name is Henry," he said. "Henry Whitmore. Especially not from someone I never met." His relatives had stopped caring once they realized his illness might cost them effort instead of reward. The ranch staff managed things, but no one truly stayed close. Clara listened without judgment. At night, she lay on a narrow bed in the clinic's guest room, staring at the ceiling. She could still leave. Nothing tied her here yet, but something inside her would not allow it. When Henry was strong enough to travel, Clara helped arrange the journey to his ranch. As the wagon rolled away from the station, Clara looked back once. That place marked the moment her life changed. She had arrived expecting a beginning. Instead, she found a man at the edge of an ending and chose to stand beside him. If you want, I can now expand part 2 in the same style, or adjust the length, pace, or emotion level. Just tell me what you'd like next. The journey from the clinic to the ranch was slow and quiet. The wagon moved carefully over the uneven road, and every small bump made Henry wince. Clara sat beside him, holding the edge of the seat to steady herself while keeping a close eye on his face. His skin still looked pale and his breathing was not strong, but it was better than before. That small improvement gave her hope. The land around them slowly changed as they traveled. Dry open fields stretched wide under the sky, broken by fences and scattered trees. Clara watched everything with curiosity. This land was nothing like the place she came from. It felt larger, quieter, and somehow heavier, as if it carried many untold stories. Henry spoke only in short sentences. Talking tired him quickly. When he did speak, it was usually to point out something familiar along the road. "That ridge," he said softly, lifting a weak hand, "belongs to the ranch." Clara followed his gesture and nodded. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. He gave a faint smile. "It used to feel like home." The wagon finally reached the ranch near sunset. A large wooden house stood at the center, surrounded by open land and barns. The place looked strong from the outside, but Clara noticed small signs of neglect. Paint was peeling. A fence leaned to one side. It felt like a place waiting for care, much like the man beside her. Two workers came running when they saw Henry. Their faces showed surprise, then worry. "You're back already?" one of them asked. "We didn't expect." Henry raised his hand to stop him. "Later," he whispered. They helped Henry inside. Clara followed, carrying her small suitcase. Inside the house, the air felt still and dusty. Furniture stood neatly arranged, but it lacked warmth. No personal touches, no signs of laughter or life. Henry was placed in a large bedroom near the window. The doctor had sent instructions, and Clara made sure they were followed. Fresh water was brought in. Clean sheets were laid out. Henry rested while Clara stood nearby, unsure of her place but unwilling to leave. That night she sat in a chair beside his bed. The house was quiet except for the ticking of a small clock. Henry opened his eyes and looked at her. "You should rest," he said. "You've done enough." Clara shook her head gently. "I'm fine." He studied her face for a moment. "You're not what I expected," she smiled faintly. "Neither are you." That earned a soft laugh from him, followed by a cough. When it passed, he looked serious again. "You know you can go," he said. "There's money in the desk drawer, enough to get you anywhere." Clara did not even glance at the desk. "I didn't come for money," she replied. "Then why?" he asked quietly. She thought for a moment. "Because I made a choice," she said, "and because walking away now would feel wrong." Henry closed his eyes, holding back emotion. No one had chosen him in a long time. The next few days were challenging. Clara learned quickly that the ranch had many problems. Supplies were low. Some workers were respectful, but others watched her with suspicion. They whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. A young woman arriving suddenly, caring for a rich man, it made them uneasy. One afternoon, a sharply dressed man arrived on horseback. He introduced himself as Edward, Henry's distant cousin. His smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. "So you're the woman from the letter," he said, looking Clara up and down. "Didn't expect you to arrive like this." Clara remained calm. "Henry is resting. He can't receive visitors today." Edward's smile tightened. "I'll decide that." She stood her ground. The doctor said no stress. Edward looked annoyed but stepped back. "We'll talk later," he said before leaving. Clara felt a chill as she watched him ride away. Something about him felt wrong. That evening Henry asked about the visitor. Clara told him everything. Edward's face darkened. "He's only interested when there's trouble," he said. "He's been waiting for me to fail." Clara sat beside him. "You're not failing," she said firmly. Henry looked at her with surprise. "You really believe that?" "Yes," she replied, "but you need rest. And you need someone who won't leave." From that day on, Clara took charge of small things. She organized meals. She spoke with the workers kindly but firmly. Slowly, attitudes began to change. Some workers saw that she was not there to take advantage. She worked alongside them, asked questions, and listened. Henry grew stronger little by little. He started walking short distances with support. Each step felt like a victory. Often Clara walked beside him through the halls or out onto the porch where fresh air filled his lungs. During these walks he shared his past. He spoke of his late wife who had passed years ago. After her death he shut himself off from the world. Friends drifted away. Family only visited when they needed something. "I thought money would keep people close," he said one afternoon. "I was wrong." Clara listened quietly. "Sometimes people don't know how to stay," she said. One night a storm rolled in. Wind howled outside and rain beat against the windows. Henry woke in distress, struggling to breathe. Clara rushed to his side, calling for help. The workers came running. Together they made him comfortable and sent for the doctor. Hours later, when the danger passed, Clara sat by his bed, exhausted. Henry reached for her hand weakly. "You could have left tonight," he said. "No one would have blamed you." She squeezed his hand gently. "But I didn't." Tears filled his eyes. "Why are you still here?" Clara looked down, choosing her words carefully. "Because sometimes life brings people together at the strangest moments," she said, "and walking away feels like giving up on something important." Henry nodded slowly. In that moment, something changed between them. It was not love, not yet, but trust, deep and quiet. The next morning the sun rose over the ranch, casting warm light across the land. Clara stood on the porch, watching the workers begin their day. The ranch felt alive again, even if only slightly. Henry joined her, leaning on a cane. "This place feels different," he said. She smiled. "So do you." He looked at her with gratitude. "Whatever happens next," he said, "I'm glad you came with me." Clara looked out over the land, feeling both fear and hope. She knew challenges were ahead. People like Edward would return. Hard decisions would have to be made. But for the first time in a long while, she felt steady. She had not just come to marry a man. She had come to stand beside him when he needed someone most. And that choice was already shaping both their lives in ways neither had expected. Days slowly turned into weeks at the ranch, and life began to follow a new rhythm. Each morning started early. The sun rose gently over the open land, and the sound of birds filled the air. Clara woke before most of the house, tying her hair back and stepping quietly into the kitchen. She learned where everything was kept and how the house worked. At first, her movements felt unsure, like she was walking through someone else's life. But little by little, the ranch began to accept her presence. Henry's strength improved, though his recovery was far from easy. Some days he could walk across the room with only his cane. Other days, he barely had the energy to sit up. Clara never complained. She adjusted to his needs without making him feel weak or dependent. She spoke to him normally, laughed when he joked, and reminded him gently when he pushed himself too hard. The workers watched these changes closely. At first, many of them doubted her intentions. They had seen people come and go before, especially when money was involved. But Clara did not act like those people. She did not order them around or demand respect. Instead, she asked questions. She listened. When meals were short, she helped stretch supplies. When work fell behind, she offered to help where she could, even if it meant getting her hands dirty. One afternoon, she joined a few workers repairing a broken fence. The sun was hot, and sweat ran down her face, but she kept going. A man named Thomas, who had worked at the ranch for years, finally spoke up. "You don't have to do this," he said. "This isn't your job." Clara wiped her hands on her skirt. "This place matters to Henry," she replied. "So it matters to me." Thomas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. From that day on, his attitude changed. Others slowly followed. Inside the house, Clara brought warmth where there had once been silence. She opened windows to let in fresh air. She moved furniture closer together, making rooms feel lived in. She placed simple flowers in jars on the table. None of it cost money, but it changed the feeling of the home. The ranch no longer felt like a place waiting for an ending. It felt like a place beginning again. Henry noticed everything, though he rarely commented. One evening, as Clara poured him tea, he looked around the room thoughtfully. "My wife used to do things like this," he said quietly. "Not the same way, but she cared about the little things." Clara paused, then smiled gently. "Little things often matter most." He nodded, lost in memory. Instead of pulling away, Clara let him talk when he was ready. He spoke of his past more often now. He talked about how he built the ranch from almost nothing, how proud he had once been, and how lonely success felt when shared with no one. "I thought being strong meant never needing help," he said one evening. "Turns out, that belief nearly ended me." Clara sat across from him. "Asking for help doesn't make someone weak," she said. "It makes them human." Henry looked at her with a quiet respect. Her words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. As Henry's health improved, new challenges appeared. Letters began to arrive more frequently. Some were polite, asking about his condition. Others hinted at business matters that suddenly needed attention. Clara read them aloud when Henry was tired, helping him decide which needed responses and which could wait. One letter, however, stood out. It was from Edward. "He wants to visit again," Henry said, his voice tight. "Soon." Clara folded the letter carefully. "Do you want him here?" Henry hesitated. "No, but avoiding him forever won't help either." When Edward arrived a few days later, he brought with him an air of confidence that filled the room. He greeted Henry warmly, but his eyes kept returning to Clara. "You've recovered well," Edward said. "Better than expected." "Thanks to care," Henry replied, glancing at Clara. Edward smiled thinly. "Care can come from many places." The conversation stayed polite, but tension hung in the air. Edward asked questions about the ranch, the workers, and Henry's plans. Clara noticed how his tone changed when money or ownership came up. When he suggested making decisions on Henry's behalf for his own good, Clara stepped in calmly. "Henry is fully capable of making his own choices," she said. "He's simply taking time to recover." Edward looked surprised, then slightly annoyed. "And you are?" "Someone who wants what's best for him," she replied. Edward left later that evening, his smile forced. After he was gone, Henry let out a long breath. "You handled that well," he said. "I wasn't trying to be rude," Clara replied. "Just honest." Henry nodded. "That's exactly what this place needs." Not all challenges came from outside. There were moments when Clara herself felt unsure. Late at night, when the house was quiet, doubts crept in. She wondered what would happen if Henry never fully recovered. She wondered what people would say if she stayed. She wondered who she was becoming. One night, unable to sleep, she stepped outside and looked at the stars. The land stretched endlessly before her. She realized that for the first time in her life, she was not just surviving. She was choosing. Henry joined her on the porch, moving slowly but steadily. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts." He leaned against the railing. "You've changed this place," he said softly. "And you've changed me." Clara looked at him. "You changed yourself," she said. "I just reminded you that you weren't alone." He smiled, touched by her words. As weeks passed, Henry began taking more interest in the ranch again. With Clara's help, he met with workers, reviewed records, and made plans. He moved carefully, respecting his limits, but his purpose returned. The workers noticed the difference. The ranch felt steadier, more organized. Trust grew not only between Henry and Clara, but across the entire ranch. People spoke more openly. Problems were addressed instead of ignored. Even laughter returned, small and hesitant at first, then more freely. One afternoon, Henry and Clara sat under a large tree near the house. A gentle breeze passed through the leaves. "I never asked what you expected when you came here," Henry said. Clara thought for a moment. "I expected a chance," she replied. "I didn't expect meaning." Henry nodded. "Neither did I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the land they were now protecting together. The future was still uncertain. Illness had not disappeared and threats had not vanished, but something strong had formed, stronger than fear. Clara had come as a stranger. Now she was part of the ranch's heartbeat. And Henry, once a man fading into loneliness, was standing again, not just on his feet but in spirit. Neither of them knew exactly what the next chapter would bring. But they knew this much. Whatever came next, they would face it with honesty, patience, and the quiet strength they had found in each other. The calm that had settled over the ranch did not last forever. Life had a way of testing what people worked hard to build. As Henry grew stronger and the ranch became more organized, attention from the outside world increased. People who had once ignored Henry now remembered his name again. Letters arrived almost every week, and visitors began to appear without much warning. Clara noticed the change before Henry did. Some visitors came with kind words and concerned faces, but their questions always drifted toward money, land, and control. Clara listened carefully, learning to read between the lines. She answered politely, never revealing more than necessary. When conversations grew uncomfortable, she found gentle ways to end them. Henry trusted her judgment. "You see things more clearly than I do," he admitted one evening. "I spent too many years believing everyone meant well." "Not everyone is honest," Clara said calmly. "But that doesn't mean we stop believing in good. We just learn to protect it." One afternoon, Edward returned again, this time with papers in hand. He claimed they were meant to help Henry reduce stress by giving temporary control of certain ranch decisions to family members. The words were smooth, but the intention was clear. Henry read the papers slowly, his hands shaking slightly. Clara stood beside him, silent but alert. "I don't need this," Henry said finally. "I'm recovering." Edward leaned forward. "Recovery is uncertain. Planning ahead is wise." Clara spoke before Henry could respond. "Planning should involve trust," she said. "And Henry hasn't given his trust away." Edward's smile faded. "You speak as if you belong here." Clara met his gaze without fear. "I do." The room fell quiet. Edward gathered his papers and stood. "We'll talk again," he said, his tone tight. When he left, Henry sank into his chair, exhausted. "I hate conflict," he admitted. "So do I," Clara replied. "But avoiding it gives it power." That evening, Henry made an important decision. He asked Clara to help him organize his personal records, including his will. Not because he feared the worst, but because he wanted peace of mind. Clara agreed, understanding the weight of such trust. As they worked, Henry shared more of his past, mistakes he regretted, people he disappointed, and chances he missed. Clara listened without judgment. She saw a man who had carried responsibility alone for too long. "You've built something meaningful," she said. "It deserves protection." The next challenge came suddenly. Henry's health took an unexpected turn. One morning he struggled to breathe and could not stand without help. Panic spread through the house. Clara acted quickly, sending for the doctor and keeping Henry calm. She stayed by his side through a long, frightening night. As Henry rested fitfully, Edward appeared again, claiming concern. He spoke quietly with the doctor, then tried to speak to Clara in private. "You should think about your future," he said. "If things go badly, this place will become complicated." Clara's voice remained steady. "My future isn't something you need to manage." Edward's eyes hardened. "Loyalty doesn't pay bills." "Respect does," Clara replied. The doctor's news was serious but hopeful. Henry needed strict rest and less stress. Clara made sure that message was heard by everyone. She limited visitors, managed communication, and took on even more responsibility at the ranch. Some people criticized her for it, but she did not waver. Henry noticed her exhaustion one night. "You're doing too much," he said. She smiled tiredly. "I'll rest when you're stronger. You don't owe me this," he said softly. Clara sat beside him. "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." As Henry slowly stabilized, rumors began to spread. Some claimed Clara was controlling him. Others questioned her intentions. The whispers reached her ears, but she did not respond. She focused on actions instead of words. One morning, a worker approached her hesitantly. "People are talking," he said. "They don't understand why you're here." Clara nodded. "They don't have to understand," she said. "They just need to see the truth." Over time, that truth became harder to deny. The ranch continued to improve. Workers were paid on time. Supplies were steady. Henry's condition stabilized under careful management. Trust within the ranch grew stronger, even as outside voices grew louder. Henry called a small meeting with key workers and legal advisors. Clara sat beside him, not speaking unless asked. Henry's voice was calm but firm as he addressed everyone. "I am grateful for concern," he said, "but my decisions are my own. Clara is here because I asked her to be." The room grew quiet. Some faces softened. Others looked away. Later that day, Henry asked Clara to walk with him through the fields. His steps were slow, but his posture was steady. "I need to ask you something," he said. She turned to him. "Go on." "If my health fails again," he said carefully, "I want you to have the freedom to choose what's best for yourself. No pressure, no expectations." Clara stopped walking and faced him. "I already have that freedom," she said. "You gave it to me the day you trusted me." Emotion filled his eyes. "You've given me more than I ever asked for." Clara shook her head gently. "We gave each other a chance." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Clara realized how much had changed. She had faced fear, doubt, and judgment. She had been tested by illness, greed, and uncertainty, yet she stood firm. Henry was not just surviving now, he was reclaiming his life. And Clara, once a stranger answering a letter, had become his strongest ally, not through force, but through patience, honesty, and quiet courage. The hardest days were not over yet, but something powerful had been proven. Loyalty could exist without ownership. Care could exist without reward. And strength could be found in standing beside someone when it would be easier to walk away. As they returned to the house together, Clara felt certain of one thing. Whatever the future held, neither of them would face it alone. The final season at the ranch arrived quietly, without warning. It came not with drama, but with clarity. After months of struggle, recovery, doubt, and strength, life seemed to slow down just enough for truth to settle in. Henry's health, while never perfect, became stable. He accepted that his body would no longer allow him to live the way he once had. Instead of fighting that reality, he learned to work with it. He rested when needed, listened to the doctor, and trusted the people around him. Most of all, he trusted Clara. Clara noticed the change in him before anyone else did. His voice carried calm instead of fear. His decisions were thoughtful, not rushed. He no longer acted like a man racing against time, but like someone who had finally made peace with it. One morning, Henry asked Clara to join him in the study. Sunlight streamed through the window, lighting the old wooden desk where so many lonely hours had once been spent. Papers were neatly arranged this time, not scattered like before. "I've finished everything," Henry said quietly. Clara sat across from him. "Everything?" "Yes," he replied. "The ranch plans, the workers' future, my personal matters." She understood what he meant, but she did not interrupt. "I've also made one more decision," he continued. "One that doesn't involve money or land." She waited. "I want you to know that you are free," Henry said. "Free to leave, free to stay, free to choose a life that belongs only to you." Clara felt a tightness in her chest. "I've never felt trapped here," she said honestly. "I know," Henry replied. "That's why this matters." He pushed a small envelope across the desk toward her. She did not open it. "You don't need to read that now," he said. "Or ever, if you don't want to. I just need you to know that nothing you've done obligates you to anything more." Clara stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the ranch stretched wide and peaceful. Workers moved steadily, their laughter carrying faintly through the air. This place, once cold and silent, now breathed with life. "I didn't stay because I had to," Clara said softly. "I stayed because I wanted to." Henry smiled, his eyes full of gratitude. As the weeks passed, Henry began stepping back from daily control of the ranch. He still advised and guided, but he allowed others to take responsibility. He believed in teaching, not commanding. Clara helped him choose people who valued honesty and effort. Edward returned one last time. This visit was different. There were no papers, no sharp smiles, no hidden intentions. He looked tired, like someone who had finally accepted defeat. "I see I was wrong," Edward said plainly. "You're stronger than I thought," Henry nodded. "Strength isn't about control." Edward glanced at Clara. "Take care of him," he said quietly, then left without another word. That was the end of interference from the outside. One afternoon, Clara packed her suitcase. She folded her clothes carefully and placed them inside. Henry watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You're leaving," he said, not as a question. "For a short time," Clara replied. "I need to see where I came from. I need to close that chapter properly." Henry nodded slowly. "I understand." When she left the ranch that day, it felt different from her arrival. She was no longer running from hardship or chasing hope. She was walking forward with purpose. Her journey back was brief but meaningful. She visited old places, spoke with people she once knew, and realized how much she had grown. The fear that once shaped her decisions was gone. In its place was confidence. When Clara returned to the ranch weeks later, Henry was waiting on the porch. He stood a little straighter now, leaning less on his cane. "You came back," he said. "Yes," she replied, "because this feels like home." Time passed gently after that. There was no rush, no pressure. Their relationship grew naturally, based on respect and shared understanding. They talked often about the past, the future, and the quiet present in between. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry spoke again. "I once believed life had passed me by," he said. "Then you arrived at that station," Clara smiled. "I almost walked away." "I'm glad you didn't," he said. "Not because you saved me, but because you reminded me how to live." Clara looked at him carefully. "We saved each other in different ways." Henry's health never fully returned to what it once was, but his spirit remained strong. He lived with intention now, appreciating simple moments, the sound of the wind, shared meals, quiet conversations. The ranch thrived not because of wealth, but because of unity. Workers felt valued, decisions were fair, trust replaced fear. Clara became a steady presence, not as someone seeking ownership, but as someone offering care. She never demanded recognition. Her strength spoke for itself. Years later, people would speak of the ranch as a place where kindness changed everything. They would talk about a woman who arrived with nothing but courage, and a man who learned that love did not come through contracts or control, but through choice. And it all began at a quiet station where a simple decision to stay instead of leave rewrote two lives forever. The end was not dramatic, it was peaceful. And in that peace, both Clara and Henry found something rare and lasting. A life built not on promises made on paper, but on loyalty proven through action.